Hi again, everybody. This is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the destination for high performers. This is the podcast where we talk to people from different industries, different niches, and find out a little bit about their success techniques, and also those things that they're doing to create big moves in their area and in their niches. So today we are going to follow along that vein. We have a really cool guest that we're going to talk to in just a couple of minutes. I think you're going to be really happy with what we're going to come out from today. A couple of quick notices. Jazz HR, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know that they're one of our supporters. And they right now, when you are an organization, maybe a small or medium-sized organization that is looking to hire now that we're starting to open some more things up, if you're doing that and struggling a bit with how to track it or how to get the word out there into different platforms, they can definitely help out with you. So if you go to our website, which is www.bigideabigmoves.com, there's a link there. Take a look at it and definitely see whether it makes sense for your company over the next little while. On the other side of things, there are lots of people that are looking for work or will be looking for work. And whether it's because you're out of a role because of what's happened recently, or if you've just decided, hey, I maybe want to change up what I do over the next little while. Epitome HR has released a few kind of career coaching packages, and that's to help you look at your LinkedIn, might help you look at your resume, and just prepare you for interviews. They usually are working with companies on the other side of things, so they can tell you some of the tricks of what an applicant tracking system looks for, and also what would appeal to a recruiter. So definitely take advantage of that. Same website, www.bigideabigmoves.com, and you can follow the link through there and see whether it makes sense for you. So today, really happy we've got Pooja Handa with us today, and she is an award-winning broadcaster. A lot of you probably recognize her from Toronto's #1 morning show, CP24 Breakfast. So she's the co-host of that. She has been a news anchor, a reporter, a traffic reporter, an entertainment host, has done all of the things in that industry. She's hosted a lot of large events too. So you probably have seen her at the Toronto International Film Festival. She often hosts the Pride Parade in Toronto, the Toronto Raptors big celebration parade after. If you were in Toronto, you know that was a huge event here in Toronto. And she's a repeat guest on shows like The Social. So she has definitely built a really strong career in broadcasting and entertainment. And we are really happy to have you here, Pooja. Thank you for taking time out of a really busy schedule, it sounds like, too. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. You know, this is such an interesting time, isn't it, during this pandemic? All sorts of things that I never thought I would see myself doing, like a podcast, but over, and connecting with people this way. It's actually been really awesome.
Yeah, it opens up a lot of doors, but it also means it's. We were talking before we came on here about how everybody's trying to figure out how does this work and how is it different than it was even 6 months ago. We probably would have talked very differently. So this is actually kind of cool that we're all trying to figure it out at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
So the one thing is, you've heard all of the things that you're doing today, but a lot of people who are probably listening are trying to figure out, was Pooja just really kind of lucky to get into some of the roles that she's in? I know that it's a very competitive industry, and you probably had to be pretty resilient in how you got where you are today. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how you built the career you have? Like where did that start, and how did you get into that career?
Sure. How much time do you have?
Yeah.
Long story. No, I do think luck does play a role for sure. In my case, I actually happen to be at the right place at the right time. But in the lead up to that, it's quite interesting. So when I was 18, I decided to move to New York City to become an actress. So I applied at the New York Academy of Dramatic Arts. I got in. And I was like, I'm going to be an actress. The rest is history. We're done. I'm going to follow my dream. When you're 18, you're very idealistic about the world. And you think that if you dream it, it will happen. And it doesn't mean it won't. It's just that it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. I got there and it was a whole new world, especially at 18. I couldn't afford to be there. My parents, unfortunately, just did not have the money for me to be there. Everything they had saved for my entire education. I blew in 1 year at prestigious school. And I realized very quickly I wasn't able to work there legally, that this dream of mine was probably not going to happen. And it was financial reasons that I needed to come back. And so I decided to come back to Toronto. I was going to instead look into broadcast journalism. And I thought, just in case broadcast journalism doesn't work out for me, I should have a backup plan. And I think maybe I learned that because of what happened in New York, in having a backup plan. So I decided to get my BA in women's studies at York, while I also went to Seneca and got my diploma in broadcast journalism. So I was doing both at the same time. And right before I graduated, I started interning at radio stations at various places. And one of the places I interned at was Global Television.
Yeah.
So I was working behind the scenes, getting coffee supplies. I was answering phones. It wasn't like anything significant what I was doing, but it was part of learning how a newsroom operates. It was part of being a sponge and taking it all in and, really understanding what went into putting on a newscast, which you learn in school, but you don't really know until you're in the environment. So anyway, I was doing that. That led to a paid behind the scenes job as an editorial assistant. And all while I was doing that, I was also volunteering in other places on air, doing free, anywhere to sort of get my, one, hone my skills, but two, just to get a presence. And they were going to be launching a new morning show on Global. And because I worked there behind the scenes, they had to give me an interview.
Yeah.
So I had the interview. It did not go well. It lasted about 5 minutes, meaning they were not really that interested in me. I was a kid right out of school.
Sure.
The girl behind the scenes who was delivering the scripts to the on-air talent. I was rolling the teleprompter. I wasn't somebody they saw that way. And anyway, that was that. I knew I didn't get the job. And in the meantime, I was offered a job somewhere else paid on air. So I gave my notice that I was leaving, and I got a call from my supervisor, and she said, "Don't take that other job." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "They're seriously considering you for this morning show." And I said, "Well, that's impossible because my whole interview lasted 5 minutes. They didn't really ask me anything. What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, the truth is we offered it to somebody else and they turned it down. And we're 2 weeks away from launch and we have nobody. And they decided to look at your tape. They thought you could do it. So, do you want it kind of thing? Do you want to come in for another interview?" And I was like, "Oh, all right." It wasn't the first choice. I was the desperate choice. They gave me an opportunity, and, go figure, they hadn't even looked at my tape before that. Again, probably because they already had somebody in mind, already knew what they wanted. And that was the luck part, right? Is that I was at the right place at that time.
But you created that luck in many ways. Like, that's the thing, is that I think if you, even just tracking back to what you did before then about, how you did all of the kind of intern type of role and all of the, probably volunteer stuff at the time mixed with eventually paid. But I think a lot of people don't realize, especially in that industry at that time, you had to basically pay dues before you even had a job in order to get to have that opportunity. And yes, maybe you were lucky because the opportunity came up, but boy, there's a lot that comes up before that.
Yeah. And I mean, look, and then that opened the door because they gave me a chance, or they took a chance on me. I did 5 years on that morning show. I ended up at CP24 after that. I've been there for 12 years now. When I joined CP24, my title on my contract was actually anchor, reporter, weather, traffic, host. And I did it all. And I did radio. I did anything and everything to really just sort of get on my feet and be a really great broadcaster. And that's really the only way to do it, is to try everything, say yes to everything. And so I did. And I think that's really helped me as a broadcaster. The fact that I could ad-lib weather and traffic made me a better reporter and an anchor and a host as a result.
Yeah, and that translates into any industry. I mean, it's whatever industry you're trying to go into. I think being able to take those opportunities when they come up, it means that doors will open eventually, and you'll be ready for them. So, that's great. The other thing that you kind of mentioned really quickly there is the impact that I think your parents had, being able to kind of help you get started on that path, even though, you know, I know it was difficult when you went to New York and things like that. Can you just talk about the influence that your parents had at that time?
Yeah, my parents have always been really supportive of whatever it is that I've wanted to do. And, you know, not everybody is lucky enough to have parents who are supportive of a career path that maybe isn't as traditional.
Yeah.
Is very competitive, as you mentioned. And at the end of the day, we were not in a financial position where I could be taking those kind of risks because I needed an income and I needed
Yeah.
to help pay for things. And eventually, you know, I couldn't rely on my mom and dad to pay for things. They would have loved to. We were living off of a single income. So they always encouraged me to go after my dreams and never said no. So even though it probably was not a good idea for me to take all of their savings that they had, you know, putting away when I was 2 years old for my education, probably not the smartest thing to do was to blow it in 1 year in New York, but it was just that expensive to live there. However, they never stopped me and they never said, don't do it. They said, you know, you have to go through this experience because you're going to grow. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And, you know, you'll find what that next thing is. And so afterwards, it meant that I had to work a couple of jobs to pay my way through school, which I value that experience so much. So I think my parents really taught me the value of a dollar. And I think it helps in everything I do, because I remember working at Global, but then also going to the Bay and working a retail job. You know, I was doing that at the same time until one salary could actually, you know, support me in a way that was comfortable.
Yeah. And there's a certain amount of resiliency that probably comes with that type of thing happening early in your career. Would you say that, you know, it's really kind of helped you continue and maybe build that career is because of that resiliency muscle you've kind of built up over time?
Yeah, and I think also I'm one of those people who's been told no a lot, and I love hearing no because yeah, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I'm really always looking for another way. So I've never been the person where, and look, my first experience is a perfect example of that. I've never been the first choice. I'm the person who's like, oh my gosh, she would be awesome. I'm always the, oh, well, let her fill in, and then I surprise people. Or, you know, because I've always sort of had a way of resonating and connecting with an audience. And I don't know that it was necessarily purposeful. I don't know that I knew what I was doing. I think I was just trying to be myself, and be relatable with my own experiences, my own life experiences that really sort of worked for me.
Yeah.
And over time, it's helped me in some of my roles. But again, it's not because anybody thought, oh, I think Pooja's going to be really great here. It's me saying, well, how about I try this? Or do you mind if I do a story this way? Or I know I'll volunteer to do this. And then if you like it, then we can do that. You know, it's always sort of this workaround mentality of, if you say no, don't worry, I'll find another way.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have somebody who modeled that for you, that, or is it kind of innate for you? Like, did you have a mentor that you thought, okay, yeah, this is, and they've given you that advice, or is it something you've just kind of had and developed over time?
I think that you have to, one, obviously have confidence in what you're doing and in your skill. And for me, I've always been the type of person who, if I'm going to do something, I want to master it. So I by no means am I perfect, and I'm always working on it, but that's what I'm doing. I'm always honing my skills. So even when I was not on air and I was working behind the scenes, I was still honing those skills. I was practicing. I was that person in the mirror with the hairbrush, you know,
Yeah.
pretending to be a reporter on. So I think because of that, there is something about being told no and then saying, oh yeah, I'm going to show you because I know I can do it. I know that I have the chops. I may not have the experience and I may not have the opportunity to showcase it. I may not have the platform, but I'm going to find a way.
Wow. Okay. And so now you've got this, you've got a certain level where, you know, you are now having to interview people at, let's say, you know, people that are celebrities and people that have a high profile. I guess two questions. One is, when you first had to do that, did you find it intimidating? And if so, were there certain people that were intimidating? And then the other side is now that, you're probably a little more comfortable with it. Is there something that surprised you about kind of having to deal with people at that level that maybe you didn't think of? So a lot of questions there, but kind of those two different ones.
Well, yes. To answer your question about being intimidated,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think if you're not scared, it probably means you don't care. I care, and I actually like the feeling of being scared. There is something exciting about it. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe it's, just not knowing, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? There's an excitement in that. But at the same time, I know that I've done the work. I've done the research. I'm prepared. And at the end of the day, we're having a conversation, and a celebrity is really just a person. They have huge entourages. They have, achieved a great level of success, but at the end of the day, everybody has something in common, which is we all want to be seen and heard. And I think as long as you treat them like people, you look them in the eye and you don't make it about the celebrity part and, the part that is a role or a character or an accomplishment, and instead you make it about them as people, you really can find a connection. And I think the more I've done it, I've learned that my in has always been coming from a very human, place of, how are you doing? Oh, have you been to the city before? Or like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Or you must be missing your family. Like very simple things that connect us as human beings that we can all relate to. Instead of, oh my gosh, I loved you in that, know, which inside it's, I'm fangirling. That's happening. But yeah, so I do find it intimidating. I do find it scary. Sometimes you make it up in your own mind that a celebrity is going to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. You meet them and you're disappointed. And that part's been hard because, you think you know them, and obviously you don't. And sometimes that can be a little disappointing, but it's also been a good lesson that, at the end of the day, all these people look up to you, and all these people, are fans of your music or your art. And I think it's really important to remember that everybody's a fan. And, even in your attitude towards them, you have to remember that it means something. You have influence on people. And so, when it happens and it's positive, it's amazing. The few times, and it's been very limited, that it hasn't been, it's usually the D-list celebrities who have the biggest egos. How about that?
Yeah, the ones that can't afford to nearly as much. But it's interesting that you say that, because there's so many parallels to a lot of people that listen to the podcast are CEOs or those top level people in an organization, and sometimes they don't realize the influence they have because they may not see themselves as that, obviously not in a celebrity way, but there is that influence part that sometimes they aren't fully cognizant of how much influence their words have. And even just kind of a hello to somebody is interpreted very differently than in their head. It's just, it was a 2-second thing that they probably didn't remember not long after that, but understanding that person may have felt that was a huge interaction in their day, and what you say can make a big impact. And it's the exact same.
Yeah, and it all comes back to that, again, that connection, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be seen and heard. So whether you're the celebrity or whether you're on the other end, as long as you see people, you're good.
Yeah, that's great. So you have a really busy time with kind of all of this different things in work. How do you personally balance that with your own kind of life outside of that? Because I'm sure you also are a person who gets recognized and all of those things too. But how do you separate it? Do you kind of integrate it? How does that work for you?
Well, I love what I do. So, if I ever get stopped and anybody says hello, people are always really kind. And, it's a very intimate thing to show up in people's homes early in the morning because they're getting ready, they're brushing their teeth, right? They're in their bedrooms. And to let us in, it's a big deal. And I never take it for granted. So I know that when people stop me and say hello, it's because they know me, because I'm a part of their family. I'm a part of their routine in the morning. And that's really sacred and really special. So when that happens, I welcome it. I think it's great. I don't think I can really sort of separate it. It's so much a part of who I am. And for the most part, what you see on TV is what you get in real life. There's really not a whole lot that's different. But of course, all the personal stuff that, you know, people don't see, you know, I don't get the best work-life balance in my line of work. So my poor family is the one that suffers the most, because they always just want to see me. And between having a social life and trying to see my family, and then also trying to make time for my husband, it can be a lot. So I do find that the balance part, I really need to work on, and I'm always making an effort to do that. But I think everybody, again, back to connecting with people and what everybody's struggling with is work-life balance. Like, everybody goes through this, right?
And it's finding out, you know, what's the best you can do sometimes, and with what you have to do. So
exactly.
So one of the other things is that you are pretty active in the South Asian community as well, and I know you give back a lot and do a lot in that community. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about, you know, how that shaped you personally, and maybe now more so because you do have that profile and influence, how you've kind of chosen to kind of give back at that time.
Sure. I'm very, very proud to be from India. And, you know, the South Asian community has been so supportive of me throughout the years. I've now been in the business for almost 20 years. So they have been great supporters. And, you know, all growing up, when in my world, at least growing up, there weren't a lot of South Asians around me. So we would go to the local temple and I would do performances and do some dances. And I was really part of sort of these cultural events growing up. So that really didn't stop. My family actually knows a lot of people as a result. We've been in this country for a long time, and we have a lot of friends, and they have friends. And so our social circles are huge. So I have a huge support system even that way, which is incredible. But the way I've sort of tried to focus my giving back is, I used to host a lot of charity events and, you know, be a part of whatever they were doing to raise money, fundraising, or whatever it was. But I realized that I have more impact in really dedicating myself to being more of a mentor. So I had a lot of students who have reached out over the years, who have asked for advice and who have, you know, wanted to talk to me about my experience and really a lot of the things that you and I are talking about right now. So I've sort of dedicated a lot of my time to that, is responding to students, you know, trying to have them come in, watch me for a day, see what it is that I do, try to give them some ideas, because a lot of younger people these days, they think they know what they want to do, but they're not sure. And sometimes they just need to experience it and be immersed in it to really know. So I like to give people those opportunities so they can see what it's really like.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because that industry has changed so much recently, and you know, people may not have a really good idea of, you know, what goes into it and what the different roles are, because they see you as the front-facing person, but there's a lot of stuff in the background as well. So it's important to see some of that stuff for especially students or people just coming out.
Yeah, and it's not just South Asian students, it's all students, by the way. I respond to everyone, but, you know, I really do enjoy taking someone under my wing, sort of thing, and helping them out, because somebody did that for me. So you know that it's so important to pay that forward.
Yeah, absolutely makes a huge difference. So one of the things I do know that you're shifting to a little bit as well is, or not shifting, it's an add-on, you know, again, on your work-life balance, I'm sure, but you do you do some workshops and keynotes and things like that for organizations. And you know, how have you started to kind of build that a little bit? Because I'm sure people are always asking you to kind of host events and things like that as well.
Well, for the longest time, that's what it was. It was, I would be invited to a school to speak, or I'd be invited to, you know, be part of a charity event, and I would sort of do it that way. And then eventually I realized, when people would come up to me at the end of, you know, my speech or whatever it may be, that they would say, you know, that I really could relate to this, or when you said that, that was me growing up, or, you know, I wish somebody had said that to me earlier, or whatever it was. And I realized, well, you know, here's something that I should really do something with, more than just when I'm asked to do it. I should really put it out there as something I offer to do. So yeah, that a lot of it is motivational. Some of it is just about connection. And I think we've covered some of that during this podcast as well, is I think that connection part is so important. A lot of people don't realize that when we have people on our show, I don't get to really speak with them ahead of time. There's always a lot going on. They're coming from another station or another interview. And usually I have about 2 minutes to sort of connect before we start our 4-minute interview.
Yeah.
Now, from doing this, 4 minutes is not a lot of to conduct an entire interview. So every word matters, getting to why they're here matters, but also trying to be personable and have a conversation matters. So how do you do all of that? And that's one of my talks as well, because I think it expands to other, sectors, other industries as well. Connection is so important, whether it's, with salespeople or whether it's with your employees or whatever it may be. Having that connection in a short amount of time, how do you do that? How do you make sure that you get the most out of people with very little time? And I feel like I've sort of found it, and that's what one of my talks is about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has such a breadth of where it could be used. Sales, you mentioned, but I think of even people that are going into interviews, and that on the other side of things, we're often coaching recruiters on how do you make that kind of connection as well. So you're talking about both sides of the fence. Even is how do you at least build enough trust so that you get to real answers as well, which is pretty cool that they may be able to kind of tap into something like that. So Pooja, if you are somebody like let's see, it's you a couple of years ago who's looking at wanting to go into a line of work like yours, or at least kind of have a similar career path to you, what would be one or two things that you think they could do today or think through over the next couple of days to get themselves kind of moving in that direction? What would be your advice there?
Well, I think that there are so many more opportunities now than when I started in this business 20 years ago. Social media is a huge platform that I didn't have access to back then, but it is wonderful. There is no longer do people need an executive to say yes. I used to, or I've been telling you about how much I've heard no, and you rely on the yes, but when you have all those other platforms, you don't need a yes from an executive. You can put it out there. The people, if they like what you're putting out there, if they like your content, they will follow you. You can really gain a lot of traction and build a resume just doing it on your own. And I know some people don't want to hear that because obviously you want to get paid. Part of it is paying the bills. But if you really love doing something and this is a passion of yours, and you want to hone those skills, this is the best way to do that. Do it by putting it into practice and perfecting it and getting it to a point where when you get in front of that executive, you're ready. And if you were in the right place at the right time, it's no problem because you've been doing it.
Well, and so many things that can move the learning curve a lot faster than it used to be, because you can learn so much on your own before you are reliant on other people that way too.
And I would just say that, I also think that, sometimes people, when they hear no, they think that that's somehow a reflection of them and their talent and, what they bring to the table. And I guess my advice is don't look at it that way. If it's that you have to be better at something, then be better at something. If it's that you have to take another course, take another course. But if it's sometimes just that, okay, it's not working this way, then what's the workaround? What's another way you can get their attention? Instead of telling them about it, how about you show them? Maybe that's the way that you can get through to where you want to be. So I always just say, like, no is going to be a part of life. It's going to be a part of the journey, no matter what you're doing. But you've got to think about what's the next thing. And if those doors don't open for you, how are you going to kick them down?
Great. And you know what? I think that's the best way to kind of leave the conversation. That's kind of what you're about. So maybe one thing is if people want to kind of connect with you and follow you, how best can they do that?
On my socials, it's Pooja Handa TV, or you can go to poojahanda.com. So on my website, there's more on the speaking and doing some workshops as well, and you can see what I'm up to there. But it's also just another way to connect, which is really cool.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll make sure in the show notes that we'll have all of that in there too, so that people can connect if they didn't get that right away. The other side would be if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, whatever podcast platform you're on right now, go and make sure you hit the subscribe button, because we have lots of cool guests just like Pooja, and we will be doing that every week. So so thanks again for taking the time, Pooja. We really appreciate it. You were an awesome guest.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right, and we'll see everyone again on Big Idea, Big Moves.